Well, good afternoon and welcome to the 2020 Data Users Meeting. My name is Joe Parsons. I serve as Chair of the Ag Statistics Board here at NASS, and I'll be serving as your moderator for this session. Although our format is different this year, we're glad you're on the call and look forward to a lively afternoon. We want to thank you all for coming and joining us. All of us appreciate the opportunity for feedback on our products and services and to discuss recent and pending program changes. As you can tell, we've made some changes to the format given the need to host this year's meeting virtually. We'll not be having breakout sessions, although we find them to be very valuable to drill into specific programs. We wanted to keep the length of this virtual meeting to a manageable length. We expect to return to offering breakouts in future meetings, and we'll look at other opportunities to have focused sessions. We're offering closed captioning to those whom you find it hard to hear the exchanges. You'll see the closed captioning on the ribbon at the bottom of the screen. We're all a little new to this, so please bear with us. If some unforeseen event or technical problem occurs, we'll try to deal with it quickly. If we're unable to remedy the issue and need to end and restart, we'll communicate with each of you via your email from the registration, likely with a new link to resume the meeting. Hopefully this won't be necessary. One silver lining with being virtual is increased participation. We have nearly over 400 attendees today, and which is more than 3 times our normal participation in Chicago. So we'll dispense with our usual introductions today, but ask that you share your name and organization as we ask questions. So speaking of questions, we have multiple formats to take your questions today. I'll go over this again at the start of the Q&A, but if you want to get in line, at the bottom of the screen on the ribbon, there's a Q&A button that you can go ahead and ask questions as you think of them. There's also a chat window that we'll monitor. And finally, there's an option to raise your hand, and we'll unmute you so you can ask your question. If someone's audio is causing issues, we may put you back on mute. If you're having difficulty, you can also email Matt Gregg or Marissa Ruber there on your screen. Matt and Marissa will also be helping you monitor all of these streams. And by the way, if you have a colleague that would like to join at the last minute, Matt and Marissa can help make that happen. So as I open the meeting today, I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge the coronavirus situation and share the operational information NASS has on the topic. Obviously, the health and safety of our employees, enumerators, and survey respondents is our first priority. We've stopped in-person data collection for now and strongly encourage farmers and ranchers to respond online. We issued a news release on March 20th. It's posted on our website, sharing our status, and that hasn't changed at this point. All of our reports remain on schedule, and we'll announce any changes to our publication schedule, if there are any, as quickly as possible by news release on our website and Twitter. Our handle is @USDA_NASS. We won't be taking direct questions on it today, however. USDA has a series of questions and answers regarding the COVID-19 at usda.gov/coronavirus across a host of topics and agencies. Your question may have already been addressed on the Q&A on the website. I also want to share that although they're not making formal remarks today, I want to share that we have Mike Connor with the Petroleum and Biofuel Statistics team with the Energy Information Administration at the Department of Energy, and Yumna Khan from Statistics Canada are online with us, and both have said that they're willing to try to take questions during the Q&A session if there are any. So in the email with the link to the meeting, you should have received an attached file with highlights of each of the participating agencies here today. You may want to take a look at that for questions and additional discussions beyond our panelists' remarks. At the end of the panelists' remarks, we're going to take a short break and then begin the Q&A. For each of the panelists, I ask that you introduce yourself and provide some brief remarks. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Lynch to get us started. So, Mike, we'll give you a moment to get your slides up, and we'll get underway. And welcome again to everyone.
All right, thank you, Joe. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Lynch. I'm representing AMS Market News here today. Thanks for joining us. Let me begin with our mission. Our mission at AMS is to facilitate the competitive and efficient marketing of agricultural products. To fulfill this mission, AMS administers programs that create domestic and international opportunities for U.S. producers of food, fiber, and specialty crops. AMS also provides the agriculture industry with valuable services to ensure the quality and availability of wholesome food for consumers across the country. For our part of this mission, Market News collects and disseminates market information and data for stakeholders to use for making marketing and production decisions. We carry this out through our four commodity divisions: dairy, cotton and tobacco, livestock, poultry and grain, and specialty crops. In light of the current coronavirus pandemic, AMS has had to get a little creative to ensure the continued delivery of our services. For Market News, nearly everyone has been teleworking since the middle of March, and reports have continued to be released every day with few, if any, disruptions. Livestock mandatory reporting and any telephone collection work have carried on as usual. Livestock auction reporting, however, has always been covered by being on-site and physically present. We, as in both federal and state market reporters, have been reporting many of these markets remotely online for markets that have a high-quality video feed that they broadcast online. For other markets that don't have a high-quality feed, we have still been sending reporters in to cover many of those markets if the market is following the recommended social distancing protocols. Aside from the current national emergency, Market News has continued moving forward with the development and rollout of our new My Market News platform. As shown on the slide, you can see the market types currently available on My Market News and those scheduled to be added this summer. By the end of May, we plan to begin rolling out market information for video auction, rice, terminal markets, tobacco, shipping point, truck rates, retail for all divisions, direct livestock, grain, feedstuffs, direct hay, and the National Feeder Cattle Summary. Transition dates for all other commodities will be announced on the My Market News website as further development continues. We hope to have all voluntary market news data moved to My Market News in the next few years. In addition, to improve the accessibility of our data, we are also offering data through our API or built-in application programming interface for downloading large sets of market news data. If you would like to learn more about My Market News or would like to schedule a demonstration, please reach out, as we are here to help. In February, Market News launched a new report dissemination process to replace our dated legacy tool. Integrated into our MARS system, this new process is more stable and secure. It also provides a new file repository for archiving. We have been working to move our legacy report archives into this new repository, which has been a pretty tedious process, so we appreciate your patience as we continue working through this. As part of the launch of our new dissemination process, the legacy slug numbers associated with reports already in MARS and our livestock mandatory reports changed to a new, more uniform naming convention in order to facilitate the transmission process. However, we kept the original slug number inside the header of these reports. In addition, all of our LMR reports are now offered in a more user-friendly and accessible PDF format. We had planned to continue offering the LMR reports in the text format until August. However, just late last week, we learned of a security patch that was applied to the LMR system by our web hosting environment in Kansas City, which ended our ability to generate text reports going forward. We have posted notes to our site to direct users to the PDF report versions, and we have reached out personally to several folks who I know use those text reports to make them aware and help them through this transition. To help with this transition to the new getting data, on April 1st, AMS introduced an API specifically for LMR data. This LMR API mirrors the functionality of the API we already had available for Mars. My team has been available and continues to be available to assist customers with setting up their own data feeds as needed. Please go to the site at the bottom of this slide for additional information and assistance with the LMR API. As you likely know, livestock mandatory reporting is up for reauthorization by September 30th, 2020. For some commodities, we continue to struggle with balancing reporting as much information as we can while still maintaining the confidentiality requirements in the statute. There are numerous ideas and proposals for possible changes being sought by the various trade associations. This seems to be a fluid process, so we'll have to see what actually comes through as statutory changes at reauthorization. Any proposed regulatory changes could be addressed during the rulemaking notice and comment phase after reauthorization. Lastly, I have one staffing update to share with you. From the middle of March until late July, I am on a temporary detail assignment in our Deputy Administrator's office, serving as Associate Deputy Administrator for the Livestock and Poultry Program. During the same time period, in my place, Taylor Cox is serving as the Acting Director of Livestock, Poultry, and Grain Market News. In closing, if at any time you have any questions about our data or services, please feel free to reach out to our Market News staff. Thanks again for joining us today. I'll turn it back to you, Joe.
All right, thanks. And we'll go ahead and move on to our next speaker. Getting lined up here. I'll let you take it away, Patrick.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Patrick Pachnett. I'm the Deputy Administrator in the Global Market Analysis Program area of FAS. I'm just trying to get my presentation on the screen here, and it looks like I might be having some difficulty. Hang on one second here. Let me try this again. Okay, are you guys seeing the presentation yet?
Yeah, we can see it, Patrick.
Yeah. Oh, you can see it. Okay, great. First thing I want to note is that FAS implemented a major reorganization in November of last year. And our analysis unit changed from the Office of Global Analysis to what we have called now the Global Market Analysis Program area. The primary change in terms of data products was realigning the export sales reporting program under GMA with the rest of our analysis products. So just a little background on FAS. We are the international arm of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Our primary function is trade policy and ensuring U.S. ag products have access to foreign markets. We operate a number of market development programs that assist the U.S. ag industry in marketing their products overseas. We also have a number of food aid and market assistance programs. But what is of major interest to this audience would be our market intelligence and analysis function. We collect and publish information on ag production, consumption, and trade, and we participate in the USDA's Rural Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates process. So moving on this slide, I've listed our market intelligence products. I'll briefly highlight a few of these before moving on to the relevant updates for this year. Of course, all of these products are fully described in the booklet that was created and distributed for this meeting. So I'll start with our gain system. These are attaché reports from our 90 offices around the world covering 170 countries. Then we have our GATS system, where we further process and aggregate official U.S. Census data into an easy-to-use database and extraction tool for our own use as well as our agricultural stakeholders. Then we have our export sales reporting, which is a legislatively mandated report that provides weekly sales and shipments of the covered commodities as reported by U.S. exporters. This is likely, well, one of our most followed reports that we have at FAS. Then we have our PS&D online database, which houses our production, supply, and distribution data for all of the agricultural commodities for the U.S. as well as our major consuming and importing countries. We have active PS&Ds for about 60 different commodities. Finally, we have our World Markets and Trade Report and our World Agricultural Production Report. So moving on to talk about updates for this year, I'll start with GAIN. Most of you are aware that we launched a update to our GAIN system last year. We had a few snags, and there are still a few things that we're ironing out to this day, but the new system is up and running and making life much easier for our attachés in our offices overseas. Probably the biggest concern with GAIN right now is the impact of COVID-19 on our operations overseas. Embassies around the world are closed to all but essential activities, and embassies have gone to 100% telework. Probably about a fourth of our officers have returned to the United States with their families. Embassies, as I said, have stood up telework to the greatest extent possible. Of course, there are some limitations. All that said, GAIN commodity reporting to support our May out year release has held up remarkably well. The vast majority of those scheduled reports are in the GAIN system or will be there soon. Going forward, our attachés will continue to provide GAIN reporting where feasible, but in this environment, I think we have to temper our expectations. There is a lot of ad hoc GAIN reporting where we're getting reports on the impact of COVID-19 on ag sectors around the world. So some of you might find that reporting interesting or useful. More on GAIN here. This slide shows the geographic concentration of our scheduled GAIN reporting from around the world. You can see the heavy concentration of reporting from places like China and India and Asia, as well as Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico in the Western Hemisphere. These countries are obviously our major markets or competitors for key commodities. Over about a third of our FAS schedule reports cover bulk commodities and field crops, as you can see on the graphic at the bottom of that slide. This slide shows which of our GAIN reports are most popular in terms of web visits. You'll note that our grain and feed reports and our oilseed reports get the most visits in terms of our commodity reporting. That's followed by livestock and sugar. And if you break down the visits by country, it's no surprise that China leads the pack here, with Japan and India running neck and neck for second place. In 2019, the United States-China trade war boosted the number of GAIN visits for China commodity reports, as well as the trade policy reports related to the tariff increases from the trade war. I'll move on to talk about export sales reporting. Many of you know in November last year, USDA issued a final rule clarifying the descriptions of fresh frozen, and chilled muscle cuts of beef and pork. This clarified that carcasses do indeed fall within the scope of the export sales reporting program. We also beefed up our outreach and were able to sign up additional exporters. So with these efforts, the proportion of the trade that we're capturing in export sales is going up. Next, our system has been updated to ensure that exporters can continue to upload their weekly export sales data as normal in the event of a government shutdown. If all goes as planned and we do have a shutdown, we would be able to issue separate weekly reports much quicker when the government reopens. So we'd be able to maintain our weekly data series and not have to consolidate weeks worth of data into a single report as we've had to do in the past. Our export sales system is overdue a full upgrade. We expect to begin redesigning the system next year. So if you have any suggestions for the system, please let us know. We'd love to have your ideas and feedback. Finally, on export sales, we are looking to intensify the number of desk audits and site visits we perform. And we're working internally with our compliance review staff to have a more robust system to ensure compliance with the program. Moving on to talk about GATS, really no changes to report here, but I'll just note that we've heard your cry for an API for GATS, and I'm pleased to announce that development has been approved, and we expect work to begin this year, so stay tuned for that. On PS&D, at this meeting last year, you guys asked for more frequent updates of our livestock and poultry data. So I'm happy to report that we are now publishing our livestock and poultry world markets and trade report on a quarterly basis now, which used to be semi-annual. The quarterly updates in January and June will include updated forecasts for selected countries. And then we have all countries will continue to be updated in April and October. So that's all I have, and I look forward to any questions and answers, questions and comments during the Q&A session. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. I think we have Mark Jekanowski is next up, as I recall, so I'll let him get his slides up there. I would say we're getting a number of questions in the Q&A and some in the chat window as well, and we will definitely get to those. So looking forward to your questions. We won't try to answer them live here because we know we have a number of folks that are audio only, and I'll repeat the questions once we get to that stage. So keep those questions coming. Mark, you ready to roll?
Yeah, I'm ready. I think Patrick has to stop sharing.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
I just
All
did.
right.
I'm still learning this technology.
Yeah, as am I. And just for warning, I struggled with this a little bit during the practice session, so let's see if I can get it to work this time. Joe, are you seeing my actual screen or the sort of speaker view?
No, actual screen. You're ready to roll.
All right, good. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Jekanowski, and I am the chairman of the World Agricultural Outlook Board. Now, I will be relatively quick. The World Board is a pretty small agency, and we are known really for one thing, you know, by most of the public, and that is the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates Report, which, as you know, comes out monthly. Now, there's a few other things we do too. We support the Office of Chief Economist. We're part of the Office of Chief Economist, and we provide analyses to the Office of Secretary and in other agencies as needed. But primarily, the Wasde report is our bread and butter. Now, we do this put this report together with a pretty small team of about 20 people. And it includes a team of meteorologists that cover the entire world. There's 5 of them on staff. And then we also have experts that cover each of the major Wasde categories, each of the major Wasde commodities. And you can see on my screen, I have listed there the board chairs that cover each of those commodities. And then working with those board chairs, typically there is also an assistant economist. And then we also have our support staff and IT staff that help us out as well. Now, of course, we don't do this all by ourselves. The World Board coordinates with several agencies from across the USDA, the Interagency Commodity Estimate Committees, and that includes the SAS and AMS and ERS and FPAC, and we pull together the data and expertise from across the USDA to put out our report each month. So just a few changes, personnel changes to announce. So as of just a few weeks ago, the end of last month, March 29, I got to remove the word acting from my title and became board chair. And prior to me, of course, I took over from Seth Meyer, Dr. Seth Meyer, who moved on to University of Missouri. He's working with FAPRI now, and he served as board chair for about 5 years prior to leaving last July. Also, just wanted to draw your attention to a job opportunity we have at the World Board. We just yesterday announced a grains analyst position. Again, this would be an analyst who would work with our grains board chair. And so if you're interested, or if you know people who are or should be interested, we're looking for a great person to fill this position. The board is a great place to work, so please encourage them, either apply yourself or encourage people to apply. One other thing I'll note, as you recall, the agreement was signed back in February. So the February WASDE was the first time when we considered that agreement. We had to give it a lot of thought in terms of how it affects the supply and demand estimates. And we we published a little report and put it on the USDA website that explains a little bit about the Phase 1 agreement and what the potential implications are for estimating the WASDE, and kind of how we handled dealing with some of the with the details of that agreement and the uncertainty that remains in the market even after the agreement. So again, the agreement continues to and will continue to affect the WASDE estimates going forward. So you can always refer back to that report if you want more detail about how we are thinking about Phase 1. Another just a little minor change I'd like to draw your attention to. This isn't something that we implemented, but we didn't have to use yet. And I just wanted to point out that starting in January, we changed our correction or errata policy at the board. So prior to January, if we had if we found a typo in the WASDE, or if there was some sort of an errata, we would typically just repost the report. It would go out under the same file name. We'd make the change, and it would be done with little fanfare. But just in the interest of a little bit more transparency and public awareness, going forward, if we find an error, if we find any reason whatsoever to repost the WASDE, we are going to repost it under a slightly different file format. As you know, the existing file format for the WASDE files in all of the formats that they're in it's basically WASDE month, year. So the April WASDE would be WASDE Well, now if it gets reposted, there'll just be a V2 attached to it, version 2 or version 3 or and et cetera. So just again so that people know that a change was made, and then we would also detail what that change is on our website. So hopefully this isn't something that we're going to need to do very often, but if we do, at least it will be fully transparent. The other big activity that we coordinate at USDA is the Agricultural Outlook Forum. Now, like the Wasde, the Agricultural Outlook Forum, the World Board serves as is kind of an agency to provide leadership and coordination in pulling this event together. We rely on input from across USDA. Almost every USDA agency is represented. It's a very big undertaking. And the picture here from this year's forum, of course, that was way back in the olden days when we could all crowd into small, tight spaces next to one another. Seems like a long time ago, but it was really just back this past February. So we had a huge jump in attendance this year. If you recall, last year we were just coming off of a government shutdown, and we also had some bad weather in February that might have bit into our attendance a bit. But this year it was smooth sailing, beautiful weather, and we had a very, very good attendance and a lot of participation from USDA senior leaders, and including the Agriculture Secretary, Sonny Perdue, and many of his sub-cabinet as well. And it was on February 21 and 22, over 1,800 participants and more than 100 speakers. And with that, I just wanted to draw your attention to next year's forum. The dates have been set, so put it on your calendar, and believe it or not, we're going to start planning already in just a few months. Usually we start our planning process in May or June, so that's right around the corner, and it's a big undertaking, and we're looking forward to putting together a great program for you next February, and hope to see you all there. And with that, I will leave it there and look forward to questions at the end. Back to you, Joe.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. I think Cindy is up next, if we can get her slides up and going here. Cindy at ERS. So.
Thank you, Joe. And let me get my slides shared here. All right. What's your view, Joe? Do you see the first title slide?
Yep, looks great. It's your title slide, and all ready to go.
Wonderful. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here for this first ever virtual panel for NASS data users. Lots of firsts for all of us, I'm sure, in the last few weeks. I'm Cindy Nickerson. I'm the Director of the Market and Trade Economics Division at the Economic Research Service. For those of you that aren't familiar with ERS, our mission is to anticipate trends and emerging issues in agriculture, food, the environment, and rural America. And we aim to do research that helps people and policymakers make informed decisions, and to make as easily accessible as possible different types of data to support that research for everyone. So my purpose today is to introduce you to some of the work that we do. I'm focusing on data products and research that our 3 different research divisions produce that are likely to be of most interest to this audience. But I would encourage everyone to take a look at our website and see the vast array of data and research reports that we produce. This work spans commodity markets and trade, as well as domestic farm income and production practices, and also data that we have on consumer food purchases and food assistance. I'll start with our Outlook program. You've been hearing aspects that ERS participates in from Patrick and Mark. We're delighted to collaborate with our sister agencies. The goal of the Outlook program broadly is to improve the efficiency of markets. So when you think of information, it's a public good, and markets operate most efficiently when everyone has easy access to that information and helps keep things as transparent as possible. Our Outlook program is a coordinated effort. I mentioned different agencies that are involved. You heard that from Patrick and Mark and Mike as well. We're using the best available data and information that we have, market intelligence, data and statistics, and we're establishing department-wide consensus. And our hope is that we can increase market confidence in these Outlook estimates by using this structure process. So one of the examples of our outputs are these monthly situation and Outlook reports. I have a screenshot here at the top of the top of our report, so you can see what the banner looks like, but we produce these monthly within a few days, I believe it's 3 days, after the release of the monthly Wasde estimates. We have reports on feed grains, oilseeds, wheat, rice, cotton, sugar, livestock, dairy, poultry, and we also release the Wasde data along with these reports. Another aspect of our Outlook program on a quarterly basis is the Ag Trade Outlook report, which we do in conjunction with FAS primarily. On a semi-annual basis, we also produce Outlook reports for commodities that are not part of the Wasde estimate, and that includes fruit and tree nuts, as well as vegetable and pulses. And these products generate hundreds of thousands of page views every year. So I'm also incorporating into my slides some screenshots. And my hope is, if you're not familiar with these already, that this will help you navigate our website a little bit better. At the top of the screen, when you come to the ERS website, you see this maroon bar. If you click on the topics bar, you can choose crops, animal products. Both of those generate a list of commodities for which we have reports and data. And this would include the monthly reports that I previously mentioned. In terms of data, some of the popular examples, most of you are likely familiar with many of these: feed grains database, meat price spreads, different commodity types of data. We also have a congressional mandate to produce cost and returns estimates for roughly a dozen major commodities. And we do that every year on a rotating basis. We have bioenergy statistics, and I'll talk a little bit later about farm income and some of the other data that we have from a joint NASS and ERS survey called the Agricultural Resource Management Survey. And then I mentioned on the consumer side, we have data, and I'll talk about that too. Okay, where to find market information. We make this available a couple different ways. I showed you how to go from the topics down to specific commodities, but you can also access the commodity data through the farm economy topic. And you'll see an option to choose this commodity outlook page. And our commodity outlook program spans data. We have projections in Tableau format. I'll show you those in just a moment. Longer term research reports. And if you'd like to sign up and get email notifications, you can do that from this page as well. And there's the way to navigate to the page. All right, Tableau, Wasde at a glance. Every month after Wasde is released, the World Ag Outlook Board sends us the Wasde data, and we produce this visualization, which gives users, we hope, an easy way to access the data, analyze the data. This screenshot here is of the overview page, so you're seeing a couple different commodities along the left-hand side here. But you can see across the top, you can select these different pages, and choose estimates for any of these commodities. And here's an example. This one is on beef. So choosing livestock and the beef option, you see that you get commercial production, consumption, exports, imports, stocks, comparing previous year and also previous month estimates, and then the forward-looking projections. Here's an example of one of the research reports ERS does. These are longer term. I wish we could turn them out monthly, but we're not quite there. These are the types of reports that are based on some statistical modeling and lots of data. And we're using economic theory to inform on factors such as what are the major factors contributing to changes in commodity prices. And we use statistical analysis. This just happens to be one example on related to price changes, but the breadth of research we do is significant and covers all things markets and trade, farm economy, rural America, food issues, and more. In addition to the short-term projections, we participate with OCE and others in USDA to develop the ag baseline projections. These are the 10-year projections, which we do every year. The last projections we produced were developed last August, but we update these every year. And these are developed using available information that we have. Moving on to farm income, we produce farm income estimates and forecasts 3 times a year. This particular slide draws from our most recent forecast, which was the beginning of February. And we're using, again, the best available information at the time and forecasting farm income and wealth and farm household income. The next forecast will be in very early September. It's usually the very end of August, beginning of September. So February, August, September, and November are the 3 times of the year that ERS produces these forecasts. These are heavily watched statistics, and when we release, we produce a webinar. So I would encourage you to sign up for those webinars to get the information download. Farm Income Atlas, we have a data viz that allows users to scroll through the farm income and wealth statistics. And I mentioned the Agricultural Resource Management Survey. This is an annual survey of farms that is conducted by NASS, and it supports a wide range of research. I mentioned commodity costs and returns. We also develop our farm income forecasts and estimates using this survey. Users can learn information about technology option, structure and organization of farms. We do research on commodity and federal crop insurance programs. We look at conservation practice adoption, changes in ag productivity, and more. And at the top of this screen shows the web page where you can navigate to the data. And it's a system where you can create tailored reports from everything from farm income and balance sheets to issues around farm numbers, farm structure, production practices, and more. On the consumer side, ERS has a strong program developing data related to consumer food. It's called the Consumer Food Data System. There are many elements to it. 3 primary ones are this first one, food apps. It's the National Household Food Acquisition and Purchase Survey. This is the first nationally representative survey of American households that collects these comprehensive data about household food purchases and links it to things like administrative data on food assistance and proprietary data. The second one, food assistance administrative data. ERS has developed a strategic partnership with the Census Bureau as well as the Food Nutrition Service, and we've acquired administrative data from the states on food assistance programs, and we leverage those data by linking them to surveys and other types of data to do a variety of different types of research. The third element is proprietary and commercial data. These data have become the backbone of many key data and research products at the department, and they're used by both ERS and other agencies for looking at a wide variety of policy issues. Well, that's a quick run through of some of the data and research that I thought might be of most relevant, and I look forward to the question and answer period.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think our next speaker was slated to be Brad Carman, and I'm pretty sure Brad got pulled away. But I think Jody Kenworthy from the Farm Service Agency is hopefully out there and may have a few remarks for us. Jody, I see you there. Hi.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay, good.
Hear you fine. Do you have any? Do you have a screen share, or do you just want to talk?
So yeah, I don't, and I do apologize for. I will not be as elegant as Brad would be, and he might be on later. So if there are questions, if I can't, if I don't cover something, please ask them, and we will at FSA will get back to everyone. So I guess for FSA, the biggest thing is as an agency overview. I don't know how much folks know about us, but we cover a fair amount of farm programs and farm loans from the Farm Bill, including Title I programs, a Title II conservation program, and then farm loans. We have 3 different deputy areas within FSA, and we have in our field, we have over 10,000 employees with over 2,000 offices in most counties. So we cover a lot of the country geographically, just physically being there. Our programs include price support programs, which are not limited to, but include our dairy margin coverage. Each month we calculate the margin and our payment. We have data that comes out weekly on the enrollment status, the production, and the payments to date by state. These are all on our website, on the FSA website. We have loans, we have commodity loans and loan deficiency payments. We have the market facilitation program, which has data up. We also have safety net programs, which includes ARC PLC. Sorry, my cat's making an appearance. Which includes ARC PLC. We have data from that, yearly data. We have lots of data on marketing year average prices, payment rates by commodities, yields, coverage, total base acreage, all available. We have acreage reporting that come out each year. We have, or is updated, I think, somewhat monthly. We have livestock forage protection, or livestock forage program, livestock indemnity program, the non-insured crop disaster program. We have so many programs, and we have data and payment data available for all of them. We also have just general, the conservation program. We have monthly reports, annual reports split up. I'm really sorry I don't have slides that show where all of this is, but if you go to our website, it's there. Our loans are there. All different data on our loan programs that we make is available. And then we also, within within USDA, share all information that's asked or that we need with RMA, with NRCS, with the Business Center. We have economists within the Business Center that really help share data, help us collect data, and we can share all of that throughout, like publicly, without as long as it doesn't have the PII data. So we have a plethora of information in terms of payments and reports. So I don't know what else, sorry, information you would all like, but we can wait till the Q&A if you want.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Jody. And I really enjoyed your cat too. That was good.
Nice.
Okay, with that, I'm going to swing it over to Joseph DeCampo from the Census Bureau. And Joseph, I think you're just on audio with us, but if you can come off mute.
Yeah,
I think
can you hear me?
some stuff to share. Sure can.
All right. Hi, everyone. This is Joe DeCampo from the U.S. Census Bureau, the International Trade Program. We produce the monthly FT900 report. When you hear on the news, you know, the trade deficit or whatever, that comes from us. You may, in fact, have seen some of our census commercials on TV lately. As always, I'd like to thank USDA for inviting us to be a part of this panel. Sorry I'm not a part of the video conference, but it's probably just as well since I've been cutting my own hair for the last 6 weeks. Just a few things so we can get on to Dan from NASS, so I know you really want to hear from. USA Trade Online is our repository for all things international trade data related. That is usatrade.census.gov. It is free. It contains data going back about 20 years, and you can create all of your own custom reports. Our revised data for 2017 to 2019 will be live on USA Trade in June at the same time as when we publish our April trade data. Global Market Finder is a relatively new interactive tool that allows users to see what's going where and also at what price. If you look at your attached handout, you'll see an updated list of webinars that Census has conducted, all of which are archived on our website at census.gov/trade, and then click Outreach. And to close, as always, if you suspect there may be any sort of data error, my boss, Gregory Candilis' email is in the handout, or you can email me at joseph.decampo@census.gov. And I always like to say the sooner the better, because we're much more likely to get a response from filers and brokers if you're asking about more recent data as opposed to something that's 2 or 3 years old. But that's about it from Census.
All right, thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. And now we'll put Mr. Crestis on the hot button here.
All right,
So
thank
Dan,
you, Joe.
take it away.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Crestis. I'm Director of the Statistics Division at NASS. It's my pleasure to bring you up to date on what is new at NASS and what reports we will be releasing this year that are slightly different than the normal data provided by NASS. So let's start off with executive summaries. We have standardized the executive summaries across the 3 branches within Statistics Division. The new format provides more information on each slide, more graphics, and it is more colorful than in the past. We started these new presentations in March of this year with the Hogs and Pigs briefing to the Secretary. We follow that up with prospective plannings and our grain stocks briefings. We plan to continue through March of 2021 with the crop production released at that time for completion of all of the briefings. Data users can find all of the executive summaries on the NASS website. Okay, there are 3 areas in Statistics Division: crops, economics, environmental, and demographics, and the 3rd area being livestock. So we're going to start off with crops today. The first item is county estimates. Funding was withdrawn by 1 supporting agency, and this reduced our commodity coverage. NASS issued an ASB notice on February 13th, so I will refer you to that notice for a list of the commodities that were dropped. Also for county estimates, we will be using a statistical model. The model will make use of survey and administrative data in a consistent manner across states and commodities. Next, we will no longer be publishing districts. This will allow us to publish more counties, as we won't have the complementary county suppressions that will have to take place like they have in the past. And the last change is a new publication rule. If you take a look at the screen in front of you, you see our new rule. With our old rule was 30 reports or more than 3 reports and greater than 25% coverage. We've added on to that where we're saying or greater than 10 reports and 10% coverage, greater than 10 or equal to 10% coverage. So this is going to allow us to publish more information than we have in the past. So when we take a look at this, these changes will allow us to not only publish more counties, but we plan to publish measures of uncertainty. All right, taking a look at the next item for crops is corn production revisions. In the past, revisions were published in January for the previous year. Our plan is that corn previous year acreage, yield, and production revisions will now take place in September. Stocks for all quarters in the current marketing year may also be revised at the same time. This information will be published in the September grain stocks report, and this change will align the revision process for corn and soybeans. Taking a look at what's coming new, everyone likes or wants additional information. So from the June survey, there will be new data published. Acres are remaining to be planted for corn and soybeans will be released in the June 30th acreage report. Continuing on with the topic of new information, new data will be published from the December survey. Acres remaining to be harvested for corn and soybeans will be released in the January crop production annual summary. Moving on to the next area, which is economics, environmental and demographics. Last November in the farm labor release, we added annual average gross wage rate for livestock workers. We also added more granular data. We added in the United States and regional annual average gross wage rate and base wage rate rates by standard occupational classification system. Also, for farm labor, we increased the sample size from 14 to 38,000, which is about 2.5 times the size that it was in the past, so that we could collect this new granular information. Looking to the future, when looking at wage rates by type of worker, we're hoping that we can possibly add in the base wage rate by field and livestock workers. Continuing on with the EDB, publications that are coming, 2 additional agricultural census items. Puerto Rico will be released on June the 9th, and outlying areas released on July 21st. On October 22nd, we'll release the organic survey. On December the 8th, we'll release the census of horticulture. In August, NASS will release information from the National Farmers Market Manager Survey. This is a joint project with AMS, the Agricultural Marketing Service. NASS also has a joint project with the Economic Research Service, ERS, and that project is a survey of irrigation organizations with a December release. The last area is livestock. The census of aquaculture was released on December 19th of 2019, containing detailed information on that subject area. Next, some programs changes for livestock. For dairy, Georgia was added to the published states for the monthly milk production program in June of 19. For bees, the colony loss program was suspended in July of 2019. However, we were able to resume data collection in the program in September of 2019. The last area is Angora goats. California is no longer published separately as it was moved to the other states category. However, this still leaves Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas being published, and these 3 states account for 81% of the inventory. Turning to our last slide, I just want to say that all NASS reports are available on our website. We're always available to answer questions either directly over the phone, or you can send those questions via the internet. One thing you don't see up there that we also do new this year is after our crop reports, not all of them, but a lot of them, Lance Honig hosts Stat Chat, and that always proves to be pretty lively. And the very last thing I want to mention is that NASS is doing a customer satisfaction survey of its data users. The survey is part of the American Customer Satisfaction Index that serves as the standard for public and private measure of customer satisfaction. So the survey is going to be emailed to the address you provided us when you signed up for this conference mid-May. We're hoping that you take advantage of that and give us some good feedback on what you like or what you don't like about NASS. And I want to thank you right now in advance for responding to that survey. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, great. Thanks to all of our panelists for a good briefing of kind of where things are at. What I'd like to do for a moment here is just remind you that there is a question and answer down at the bottom on the ribbon there, and I see the numbers keep ticking up, so we're going to have plenty of questions. Also, for the attendees, you should have the opportunity to raise your hand, if you will, and I'll take some questions from there. And then also there's a few in the chat room there as well. We'll be looking for that. And then finally, I have some questions that were emailed to us beforehand, and I'll try to work those in. So if you're a panelist, you may want to look at the Q&A in the next couple of minutes, and we're going to get started. But first, I'd like to take a 5-minute break. So set your stopwatch. We're just going to take a 5-minute break and pause, and we'll be right back, and we'll get started with the questions. So, all right, everybody, we'll see you in 5. All right, well, I have our 5 minutes is up, so we'll get started back. And I'm going to start with the first few questions from the Q&A window. And I'm also going to be watching. If anybody wants to follow up with their question, Bill, the first question I have came from Bill Lapp. And so, Bill, if you want to follow up verbally, you'll need to raise your hand, and I'll be able to take you off mute, okay? That's the easiest way for me to do that. So, first question is actually from Mike Connor at the EIA. Thank you very much for participating today. I'm excited to see EIA provide monthly information regarding renewable diesel and production, and feedstock usage. When will this public report be available to the public? Will it be published at the same time as the biodiesel monthly report on production and feedstock usage?
Right, so can everybody hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so we don't actually have a date yet for that survey to start. It was approved by OMB on, I believe, January the 8th. So, and I know that we have an effort going on right now to get a system up and running that will allow us to process that new survey. So I'm anticipating, probably sometime this summer, we'll be able to start collecting the data and begin to make that available. In the meantime, we're going to continue to report all of our existing data on the monthly biodiesel report, and of course ethanol production, and those numbers that we've been doing all along. And in the future, the intent is to have the new survey data come out on the same schedule that we've been doing for our existing surveys. So about 60 days after the end of the report period is when you could look for that data to be available once we start collecting it.
Okay, thanks. Next question is also from Bill, but I'm just going to go down through here for now. And again, you have the opportunity to should be able to raise your hand if you want to get in on this verbally too. This question was, this is towards NASS. Please clarify if the updated 2019 crop estimate will be made in May, June, or both. Will North Dakota corn soybean crop estimate be made separately? Lance, do you want to take that? This is on the resurvey harvested acres.
Sure, thanks, Joe. I'll take that. So, as I'm sure most of you are aware, back in December when we did our survey for the end of year acreage yield and production, there were a number of acres still left to be harvested at that time. And so as a result, in January, when we issued the annual crop production report, we also issued a notice that we would be doing some resurvey work in 5 states where the majority of that unharvested production was for corn and soybeans. Here recently, we made the announcement of when that resurvey would happen, or at least part of it. So even as we speak, we're finishing up data collection for 4 of the 5 states, Michigan, Minnesota, South Dakota, and Wisconsin. So once we've got all that data collected, we'll evaluate it, and if any updates are necessary to the 2019 production, acreage yield or production for those crops in those states, then we'll be publishing updates in the May crop production report here in just a couple of weeks. So we'll definitely have updates out then if there are any. Now, North Dakota, if you've been following the progress up there, they've still got more than 10% of the corn acres still standing out in the field, or at least did this past week. So we were not able to go back out and gather that data just yet. That'll come at a later date. We don't know exactly when yet because we need farmers to make a bit more progress on getting that crop out of the field. Hopefully, it certainly should be soon enough that we'd be able to evaluate that state before the June crop production report. That would certainly be our expectation, but until we see some more progress there, we haven't fixed any dates on when that will occur. But that's the plan as it exists right now. And I see Bill raised his hand, so I don't know if he has a follow-up on that.
Oh, okay. Well, let me go over and pick up Bill here, and I'm going to allow him to talk. Bill, you're live, or unmuted at least.
Okay, I just wanted to thank you and Mike Connor for participating today and helping us out with those questions. Appreciate it. That's all I had.
Okay, thanks, Bill. We'll move on. I don't know who asked this question, and I'm repeating the questions, by the way, because I know we have about 30 or 40 folks that are simply on the phone, and they may not be able to see this window. So I want to make sure that everybody hears both the question and the answer. Excuse me, my screen jumped. Okay. When will soybean oil be used for renewable diesel be reflected along with the usage for methyl ester in the monthly Wasde balance sheets? Also, will the change include any historical revisions? Thanks. That was directed at Mike, but I suspect it might be more towards Mark Jekanowski, so I'll let you guys duke it out for who wants to answer.
Yeah, this is Mark, and let me actually see if Keith Menzie is on the line, if he might have any insight on that. Keith, you on?
Yeah. So I guess it would really depend mostly on when we begin to receive the data. That time, I guess we'd start to include it. And I thought a little bit about the question about historical revisions, but without any actual data going back kind of the way we did with biodiesel, where we had been tracking methyl ester for quite a few years before it came online. I guess I haven't exactly decided how I would be able to handle that, but it would be difficult to break out a separate line in the balance sheet for renewable diesel prior to the commencement of the actual data series. I know there's data at EPA that we follow in regards to that, but it doesn't break out by feedstocks.
Okay, thanks. Mark, anything else? All right,
No,
I want to actually jump over. Sorry, go ahead. All right, I'm actually going to jump over to a few questions that have already been answered. But like I said, I know that there's some folks that can't see the answers. So one came from to Mike Lynch at AMS, and it was, I'm having a programmer to work on improving the efficiency of my API downloads. Who's the one contact within AMS that I can have this programmer reach out to? And Mike responded, Json Carwall, and and so it's jason.carwall@usda.gov. Also a request for slides. We will make everyone's slides available. Another item that was already answered, this was to Patrick Pachnett. If all goes as planned and we have a government, I don't know what that one was. I'm going to slide past that one. This is from Joel Carlin to the World Board. Does or can the World Board put past Wasde reports data in spreadsheet form for retrieval? And Mark gave an answer. Spreadsheet versions, XLS versions are available going back 10 years at the Cornell Mann Library site. And then there's a link there at USDA Mann Library, and a longer link. So I think the person got that had wanted the request, but it is available. This one's been answered as well. This is from Robert Brown for AMS. Since we suddenly now will never have access to TXT reports, a cheat sheet that matches up the slugs for the PDF reports with the corresponding text files would be helpful. And Mike shared. There's a report master list maintained on our MMN site here, and then he gives a link to it. So there is a reference there. And then, here we go. For AMS, has the agency considered including non-GM conventional grain in surveys and reports? And Mike, I can't quite see, my window isn't coming up far enough. Mike, do you want to go ahead and answer that one live? The GM conventional grain?
Sure, Joe. Yes, we have for a few years now been reporting a non-GMO GE grain report out of our, I believe, our office in Greeley, Colorado. And I had provided the link to that report, but it's in our menu of national grain reports on our site.
Okay. I think this one was probably also for you, Mike. Could you repeat the link for downloading data rather than just the PDF? This was from Gary Blumenthal. Yeah, could you repeat the link for downloading data rather than just the PDF?
In the website or in the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
For the help, on the Mars API, if you go to https://mpr.datamart.ams.usda.gov.
And we'll make sure on the transcript of this call that all of these things are linked and available to everybody. So we will have a transcript of the meeting that we'll post. So as well as the slides, we'll make sure and make those available to everybody and give you a link to where those are posted after we get done here. All right. This was for World Board. Hi, what is the timeline from Raphael? Sorry, Raphael, I'm going to mess up your last name, Bucarelli. What is the timeline to make historical Wasde reports available as a database or through an API?
All right, this is Mark. Yeah, that's a good question, and I realize that it's probably come up at the past few data users meetings. So just for a little bit of background, I think, as you know, I mean, this was a project that started a few years ago. Seth Meyer, my predecessor, kicked it off, and he's been spending a lot of time working on it even after he left the World Board, and basically compiling the entire data set of historic WASDEs going all the way back to April of 1973 or whenever that first one was. The good news is that process is in fact actually complete, and what we're doing right now is just still kind of struggling with trying to find a place to house the data and where to release it. You know, there's a few issues with it that make it a little bit complicated on our end, because a lot of that data, I mean, we can't really call it official data. A lot of it was hand entered based off of paper copies from decades ago. So we want to kind of do it as some sort of almost a open source kind of you know, user beware type of data at first until any potential, you know, glitches are found, although we don't expect there to be any. So we're working on it. It's almost complete, and we just got thrown off a little bit, of course, these past few weeks and months because of the, you know, move out of the South Building and more telework. So it hasn't been right on top of our radar, but we are getting there, and we hope to have something out, you know, later this spring, early summer for public consumption. At least I hope so.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I've got a few questions, several questions actually, that came in before we started the meeting, and I'm going to swing to a few of those and then come back to our Q&A window. The first one is, how is NASS handling the June area and objective yield survey this year? And I'm actually going to pair that one up with another one that came in as well, which is quite similar. How do the current stay-at-home orders affect NASS objective yield plots? I'm sure you can assign them, but can you go out and stake them, etc.? In all states, including those with shelter in place. So Lance, I think we chatted a little bit about this. Do you want to take that one?
Sure, I can do that. I'll start with objective yield. And of course, winter wheat objective yield is the first one up. We'll be hitting the fields here, actually within just the next couple of days. So as you all know, the reason the question comes up is because objective yield is all done in person. And as Joe mentioned earlier, we have suspended all in-person data collection, but there's a little bit of a difference with objective yield. We say it's in person, which means we actually send a person out to the field. But the good thing for us in this situation is that when enumerators go in to do their field work for objective yield, they go alone. They don't work with the farmer. And so it really isn't truly in-person enumeration. The only factor we had to deal with is that normally our field selection process is something that we would go sit down with the farmer and list out fields and kind of run through things that way to identify our selected sample field. We've modified our form and our procedure a little bit on that so that we can actually do that field selection over the phone. The farmer will provide the enumerator with very specific directions to that field once we've determined what that field is, to ensure that the enumerator knows where to go to do that. So for objective yield, it's everything is on and moving forward. And like I said, for wheat, we'll be out in the fields here within just a few days for that first iteration of that survey. The June area survey, that truly is historically an in-person interview survey. If you think about it, the primary purpose of the June area survey is really for us to measure the incompleteness of our list. That's the big driver behind why we do that. And in fact, the normal reason that it's in person is because we have these segments of land that enumerators have to go out and first determine who all the operators are within those segments, and then meet with them to collect the required information. We then match that against our list to find out who potentially we could be missing. So to work around that this year, we're actually going to reuse the June 19 area frame for this measure. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to carry the data forward from 19. And in fact, but what we're going to do is we're going to use that frame. So we're going to use those same selected operations. We will match them up against our list frame again to make sure that we still know what we might be missing there and what we're not. And then we will collect updated information from them. But because we're using last year's frame, farms we've already identified, we'll be able to collect that information either over the phone, via mail, or through our online reporting. So we will continue to do what we've done in the past. We'll do it a little bit differently, again, by reusing some of the frame from last year, but we will gather updated information this year, and we'll be able to provide the same estimates for the acreage report that we always have in the past.
Okay, thanks, Lance. And Dan, here's another one we've talked a bit about that came in. How is NASS handling lockup reports?
Joe, you know, I think as you kind of alluded to in your opening statement, I think that all NASS reports will be going out on schedule. We fully expect crop production to be released under tight security controls. While the health and safety of our employees, our enumerators, is our first priority, we continue to evaluate all data collection requirements and agency operations as conditions change, and that also includes the May crop report. But we plan right now to remain on schedule and keep tight security controls.
Okay, great. And Mark Jekanowski, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, no.
Wasde and crop production go up simultaneously?
Yeah, exactly. No, I would just say that we're on the same page with NASS, and we're also fully expecting that all of our monthly reports will go out on schedule and under you know, the tightest levels of security possible.
Okay.
Usual.
All right, Lance, I think we've already kind of touched on this one, but if you have anything to add, you can. North Dakota was excluded from the list of announced resurvey states for the May crop report. Will North Dakota be resurveyed for June or later? I think Lance has addressed that. When we have a clear signal that the crop's been harvested, we'll be back out there.
Audrey, how are you?
Oops, I'm getting some audio here. Maybe Matt, you can mute if you need to.
Another call with a bunch of people.
Okay.
On my surface.
Next question I have out here is, how does World Board come up with ethanol forecast or wheat by class export history, as census does not report wheat by class? Mark?
All right, two pretty technical questions, and I've got my technical experts on the call here. So let's go to Mike Jewison for ethanol, and then Bill Chambers for wheat by class. Mike.
Mike, you're talking, but we can't hear you. I bet your phone is muted.
Hear me now? Does that work?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
sure whatever
Sorry
you
about
said
that.
was great, but you need to.
So it's a great question. Obviously, in the ethanol world, it's complex to say the least. But at any given month, we would, for the most forward-looking indications of what's going on, lean heavily on what EIA puts out, both in terms of the short-term energy outlook and also their weekly petroleum status reports. Obviously, with the scenario that we're under right now, where things change less than a week, Weekly petroleum status report is obviously very crucial to providing an indication for both what's being produced and also stock levels, and also domestic motor gasoline consumption. But also keep in mind too, EIA is an indicator that we use to get back to what NASS, what you guys end up surveying, that's reported as being used to make ethanol both in the form of corn and sorghum. So that's the short answer to that. And if you need further explanation, feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call.
Okay, shall I jump in? Shall I jump in and talk about the wheat by class?
That would be great.
Yeah. Okay. Frankly, it's an even shorter answer for the wheat by class. Of course, we get our final export data from census. And to break it out by class, we use ratios from export sales as well as donations, where we do have the by class data. So we get the overall number from census and then break it into by class using FAS export sales.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to come back around, and I should have probably put this out there when we were talking about the resurvey stuff, but assuming, Lance, assuming some acreage or yield loss is seen in the resurveys, will the January final yield and production be adjusted, or will any slippage just be buried in residual use?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, Joe, when we get the results of the survey in, if there's any updates that are necessary based on that new information, we'll be publishing new acreage yield and production numbers for the 19 crop in the May crop production report. And then, of course, after we go back out and are able to resurvey in North Dakota, the same thing will apply. If that new data justifies any additional changes to last year's crop, then once again, in the next report, which, as I mentioned, hopefully would be June crop production, we would then publish updated numbers again. And then, of course, that would allow our friends down at the World Board to incorporate those new numbers into their Wasde report beginning then.
Okay, and while I have you on the horn here, I'll let you take this next one. We are also going to be, previous year's acreage uses weights for crop progress instead of this year's prospective planting. Do you want to share why that is?
Well, for the most, yeah, there we go. For the most part, you know, we've always used, or pretty much always used, previous year acreage numbers for the progress numbers in the following season. We want to make sure that we've got a consistent acreage weighting scheme throughout the season. If we were to, you know, use the current numbers from prospective plantings now, when the acreage report comes out at the end of June, we would need to shift those acres over then. And obviously, any change we make to the weights is going to change those, I'll call them US, you know, maybe it's an 18-state total or whatever number that might be. And we certainly don't want to see those progress numbers change simply from week to week because we made a change in the weighting scheme. So we want to make sure that we're consistent throughout that entire process with the same set of weights. One other question that I've had recently on that same topic is a question about why we're continuing to use last year's weights this year, knowing that last year was such a strange year. And I guess I have a couple of comments for that. First of all, I think it's important that we stay consistent in our procedures. If we start to pick and choose which weight we want to use in any given year, I think there's always the potential to question whether or not something was different than normal. And so I think you get too much judgment coming into the equation then. And the second comment I would make about that is even though last year's acreage swings were pretty significant, it was largely in total. And so if you look at how we use these acreages for weights, it really doesn't become a big factor unless you've got large swings in the proportion by state as well. And certainly there were, you know, 2 or 3 states in particular that did swing more than others. But in general, for as big a change as we saw in total acreage, particularly on soybeans, the distribution of those acres across the states included in crop progress really didn't change as much as you might think. In fact, I went back and recalculated. We're early in the season, but I did go back and recalculate those progress numbers for the first couple of weeks for corn and, of course, the first week for soybeans, and it would have had no impact whether we used this year or last year's acreage on those totals. Now, as we get farther into the season, I know the impact could be a little bit larger, but that's the thought process that we use for those weights.
Okay, thanks, Lane. We had a question from Brad Winblad, earlier about will there be any integration with popular R and Python programming languages that allow users to pull data directly from NASS? And I know Brad has created a package, an R package that allows quick stats data to be pulled down easily. I believe the context of this question is that we're looking at an upgrade to our dissemination system in the future, and we're kind of just getting underway with that. It certainly is our expectation to create an API such that you could hit it with in many different ways. And so I think the answer to your question would be yes. I'm going to swing back to the Q&As. We've certainly built up a good number here. It looks like we've got a few more questions that we got from beforehand, but I'm going to come back to where we left off here in the Q&A section. And this is from Caitlin McCulloch. I find it disheartening that USDA ANSS will not be able to honor its commitment to the industry to release text files through August. On the initial announcement to industry, USDA heard from numerous data users the burden of this transition puts on data users. There's not been enough transition time, only a fraction of the 6-month transition. The industry needs more time. The change has not happened overnight. We ask that you roll back the security patch for as long as possible. So I know I read that kind of fast, but Mike, you have a comment there?
Yes. Well, first of all, let me apologize to Caitlin and others. This was unexpected for us as well, as far as happening, late last week when we got the security patch information. Understand these are applied by the department, and we really have no say over those. Now, that said, this is a project that we've been working on for probably 4 or 5 years now. When we learned that text reports were no longer going to be supported, we've started building the LMR reports. I believe 4 years ago is when we started. And it's been an iterative process where we did release some and we continued offering text. We've always had, kind of qualified our conversation with, we're going to try to offer them as long as possible. But we know that sometime there's probably going to be some upgrade to the network or to the system or some patch that could disable the function of being able to create text reports from the programming that we have in our system. So again, I apologize, but we are in, we looked at rolling back the patch, and you could do it for a few days, and we just don't believe that is worth the squeeze at the moment. We believe we're farther ahead by helping people get on board, helping them set up their data strings with the API, and we're going to work through that. We have not heard from that many people really who have been thrown by this. There's some we have, and we have been able to point them to where they need to go to get the PDF report, set up their feed, and they've been able to do that. They're likely not as heavy of a data user as LMIC is, and we understand that, but we've also been right there working with LMIC and others to help them bridge this gap, help them get past this. But at this point in the game, we really, none of us working on this project really have the authority to put the agency at odds with the department over the application of a patch. So at this point, we're going to continue working through to move people to the PDFs and to the API.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And Caitlin, if you want to chime in here verbally, raise your hand and I'll take you off mute. This question was also from Caitlin. This question is for USDA ANSS. We need a method for tracking corrections or reissues of reports. I suggest a summary provided each week of reports that were released after the initial release so that we can re-pull the data through the API.
Yes, Joe. I'll start to answer this, and then I might ask Jason Carwall to chime in. That's something that we have been looking at. I think all of its agencies, as we've been working to create these APIs, well, how do we handle corrections or changes in the data? We've had to set that aside at the moment just because we were developing the replacement for our dissemination tool and getting the LMR API launched out there. But once we have those out there, we should have all the pieces in place, but I'll let Jason chime in if he has more details.
Sure. Pretty much what Mike said is true. We've been transitioning a lot of separate pieces into the same system, and now we have everything we need in place, and we're looking at the possible solutions to this of identifying corrections in the API, as well as providing a page that summarizes any reports that have been corrected within a certain time frame. We're still gathering some final requirements, and we should be able to have at least the page that identifies which reports have been corrected out, at least for people to view and for public users to test by early summer, as we move towards that. So it is something that we have on our priority list, and we understand how useful that can be, especially as we push more and more people to consuming the data through the APIs.
Okay, thanks, Jay.
And hey, Joe, one more thing, if I could add on to that, from the LMR perspective, which is really a separate system from ours, we do have plans looking forward into next year when we get to this, is including in that year's enhancement, a centralized change management notification process for users. So it'd be optional. Users could toggle on or toggle off if they want to be notified if new features are introduced, if new reports are issued, if there are system issues. And then we're also working on a method to notify users of any corrections or superseded reports through the LMR Data Mart system. And those will probably be coming, the plan is for those to be coming in 2021.
Okay, great. This next one will be for Cindy, I believe. This is from Jerry Goodell. Recently, corrections have occurred, particularly in the feed outlook for April, when the quarterly corn table had feed demand level that impacted the March 1 stocks. Has this been a staffing issue or some other reason why this data was issued before a correction? This also occurred in F&O U.S. soybean crush for February. It's a tough time, but any reason, tech, or supervision for these big corrections occurring?
Thank you. I appreciate the understanding. This wasn't a staffing issue. It was just a tech issue related to data transfer that happened. And I'd have to look back at the February one. I saw your question. I've been trying to get an answer while waiting for Joe to ask the question, but don't have one yet.
Okay, well, we'll let you loop back to it if you get to it before we're off the call here today. And then the next question also for Cindy. Can Outlook reports, from Kim Lovett at ADM, can Outlook reports and analysis include monthly estimates like soybean crush and the oil crops outlook, in addition to the quarterly and annual values? So looking for some monthly data.
So that's obviously going to depend on the frequency. I'm going to have to get back to you on that question. Actually, okay. Unless there's anybody, Mark, is there anybody in your team that could comment on that, Jakanowski? Mark, did you hear?
Could you repeat that question?
Yeah, I'll repeat the question. This is from Kim Lovett at ADM. Can Outlook reports and analysis include monthly estimates like soybean crush in the oil crops outlook? So can Outlook reports and analysis include monthly estimates in addition to the quarterly and annual values?
So in the ERS if you're talking about in the ERS report, I'm not sure what the technical parameters are, but the data is certainly available.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look into that.
Okay.
You might
Well,
check
sounds
with
like one
Mark
that we can
Ash
take
on
back.
that.
Yeah, I can't reach him at the moment.
So the next question I'm going to take, this is from Bill Leff. Joe, you have hundreds of people on this call. Beyond the call or inquiries, is there a possibility of leveraging the interest and insights of the people on the call and others interested to guide how the data is presented and delivered? I'd be glad to volunteer to be on any agency committee. All right, nothing like having volunteers. I think the short answer to that is yes. And in fact, we have a strategic initiative at NASS that is looking at our dissemination process, and we will be, as we move forward, we'll be looking for input. We're not exactly at that stage just yet, but it won't be very far away, and I'm sure we'll be reaching out to y'all to give us some insight. So the answer to that is yes. And this also for Cindy. Wait, actually I got one for AMS first. Do we know when the estimated fluid milk product sales report will be released again? Last release was December 10th, 2019 for the October data.
Yes, Joe, we had saw that question earlier, reached out to our friends at Dairy Market News, and the answer we received is they expect it to be out in the next week. But what I'll do is make sure that somebody from our Dairy Market News team, they can respond to Caitlin directly if they have other information as to when that report, if it's going to be different than that.
Okay. Next question is from Sue Gray for Cindy. Is ARMS data collected that is not openly available on the site? And if so, can it be accessed or purchased? Thanks.
Yeah, Sue, thanks for the question. There is an opportunity to request a special tabulation. It's not called special because we limit the results to the person who asks for it, but it's special in the sense that you can't already get it from the estimates that we have publicly posted. There is a process to follow, and that is outlined on the ERS website. If you go to the ARMS data page and look under Contact Us, it'll explain the process for requesting a special tabulation. What we do is, obviously this depends on our staffing, but the types of tabulations that are of greatest interest are the ones that we do, because we do post what we make available to one, we make available to all. So the request for the tabulation is given to the requester and then at the same time posted to our website.
And I should add that we have a similar process at NASS for our data sets as well, especially for the Census of Agriculture. We have many special tabulations, and we do make them available to everyone who has an interest. And we have a queue of those right now that we're working through. We also, for qualified research, if someone has a question they would like to ask of the data, some sort of analysis, with regard to ARMS, we and ERS work on with folks to get them secure access and allow them to conduct their research. Similarly with the Census of Agriculture and other data sets. So we have a process for that, and there's a link on our website to be able to get there, and I know ERS has similar links. So, and if you can't find what you're looking for, you're welcome to reach out to me or Cindy, and we'll get you square.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Kroll, what happened to the JSON file for the quarterly, that's JavaScript object notation file, as I recall, the JSON file for the quarterly grain stocks at the end of March? Dan or Lance, you got an answer for me?
Yeah, Joe, I can jump in on that. So the JSON files are only posted out there for the day of the release. And I'm not aware that anyone reached out on that day indicating that the file was missing. So obviously at this point, it's kind of hard to go back and track on that, but we'll certainly make sure that everything's in place to keep those out there properly on release day.
Okay, thanks. This is for Joe DeCampo. Robert Brown. We see trade data from Australia and Brazil within 10 days of the end of the month. I appreciate USA volumes as order of magnitudes bigger than those countries, but will release dates for trade data creep forward in coming years?
I really couldn't say. I don't know that there's any movement to push press release dates forward. We do have an advanced release, which gives things at a very high level. That comes out a little bit before our FT900.
Okay. All right, and Robert, if you want to have some additional engagement with Joseph, his email address should be out there. You guys can talk some more with he and his team. Okay, Dale Burkholz. Hi, Dale. Has a question for Dan Karestas. We're doing a survey in conjunction with ERS on a survey of irrigation organizations. So Dale's asking Dan, what information is going to be included in the survey of irrigation organizations? So Cindy, you may have a comment on that too, but Dan?
Yeah, I can start that off, Joe. First of all, we're going to organizations that provide off-farm water for farms or manage groundwater usage on farms. And we're going to be looking at providing a breakout of the services that these organizations provide, the amount or volume of water that they control and work with, and then also some associated economic data. And as you know, that survey was last done, I believe, gosh, 1974? Is that right, Joe?
I think 78. 78, I believe, but in the 70s for sure.
Yeah. So that's all I have. If ERS wants to add on to it, they sure can.
You did a nice job, Dan.
Cindy says.
We're good.
Okay. Dan, can you please elaborate on not publishing crop reporting or ag statistics district numbers? This is in regard to county estimates, your comment then.
Yeah. What we did there is we've been taking a look at standardizing everything that we do in NASS and making consistent across all commodities, and at the same time looking at how we do county estimates as a whole, with our goal to publish more information. That's one thing NASS always wants to do, is make sure that we're publishing the most information that we can. And by not publishing the district estimates, it allows us to publish more counties. Because in the past, say you had a county in a particular district you couldn't publish, you have to hide another county with it. So you wind up not publishing two counties. So under this new rule, we'll have a lot more counties that will be publishable than were in the past.
So we did a series of simulations, and we can tell both from the complementary disclosures, being able to get rid of many of those because of the ag statistics districts, but also the new publication rule for crop county estimates relative to holding everything else constant. The number of counties that will be able to publish crop county combination counties will be much higher. I'm going to swing back over to some of the questions that we got before the meeting started, and then we'll come back to the question and answer queue. Would like to understand better how you look at livestock data and calculated residual to come up with conclusions on stock adjustments. Also, is this a change in methodology, adjusting stocks to better fit feed and residual, or is this just something NASS has always done but the public hasn't seen due to being done prior to the release of stocks data without revision in later quarters. Lance, do you want to take that one? We've probably got a couple of, and actually, let me repeat another question right behind it. You may want to take them together. What is the rationale behind last year's 18-19 soybean production change at the end of the crop year with September 1 stocks? Seems to be a departure from the past where crop size was adjusted if feed seed residual indicated a problem, because the production change from not looking at feed seed residual would not have implied a change anywhere near as large as was made. The question kind of goes on, but you've seen both of these, Lance. Do you want to kind of explain and talk through that?
Sure, and I guess I'll start with the soybeans. Because for soybeans, it actually was not a departure from our normal process or anything we've done in the past. The only difference, I believe, for soybeans last year was the magnitude of the change was a little bit larger than we would see in most years. But the normal course of action, of course, is at the end of the marketing season, we're looking at a balance sheet. And of course, for soybeans, virtually every soybean is counted in some form or fashion, because if it isn't crushed or exported, there's just not a whole lot of other use out there. So it's fairly common at the end of the season for us to make some adjustment to our previous year's production to, based on that updated balance sheet information we have for the entire season. But again, probably the biggest factor last year was we needed to make a little bit larger adjustment than we have in most years. Speaking of corn, the first part of the question talks about how do we use livestock inventory numbers. One of the components that we look at is something called a grain consuming animal unit. Our friends over at ERS actually generate some data on that, and basically it's just a it's a way to try to get some measure on how much feed use there might be based on livestock inventory levels. We certainly don't use that to zero in on exactly how much grain was used for feed, but it is something that we include in our analysis package, so that it would be the way that we incorporate livestock inventory information into a look at a balance sheet for corn. Looking at the revisions that we made to the 18 crop and then also to the ending stocks numbers last year, a couple of things I'll point out there. Number one, procedurally, technically, that's always been an open process for us. Certainly you're well aware that we made larger revisions last year than we probably ever have. So, technically you saw something you haven't seen in the past, but procedurally that's always been an open process in January. As Dan mentioned in the opening of our presentation this afternoon, we are going to move that process to September. So it'll be in the same time frame that we do soybeans. Basically what that means is that we'll have an opportunity to look at the previous year's production at the same time that we're setting the ending stocks rather than doing it a quarter later. And so that will be one positive change moving forward. Does that mean that we're going to continue to see larger revisions to corn moving forward? Well, we don't know the answer to that because we haven't seen, what this year's crop final marketings are going to look like. But certainly, as has always been the case, both production and stocks are going to be subject to review at that time. Of course, it'll be the first shot at setting the ending stocks, but also the previous quarters will be open to revision at that same time. And we think by bringing that into September, not only does it align it with soybeans, but again, it really gives us a chance to do it on the spot rather than having to look back a few months later like we currently had to do in January. I would point out, if you want to think about the rationale behind the adjustments that we made, certainly residual was a component of that, but I want to be very clear, we did not set a target residual. We don't know exactly what that feed and residual number should be, but as we were reviewing the balance sheet, it appeared to us in our analysis that residual was a bit larger than what would have been expected. So as we analyzed both production and stocks for potential revisions, we did keep in mind that any adjustments that we made that would provide some benefit to that residual number would probably be a wise thing to do. And so it did enter into our conversation and into our analysis, but no, we don't know exactly what a feed and residual number for corn is. And last year we did not make an attempt to set a feed and residual number and adjust to get to that. So I think I'll leave it at that, Joe.
Okay, well, Lance, you must have struck a nerve. I see I've got some folks with their hands up. The first person is Jenny. Jenny, I've unmuted you, so you're welcome to talk if you wish.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, well, I was just following up with what Lance had answered. Thank you in the last one about the soybeans. I do understand with soybeans that there is little other demand besides crush and exports that you know, and that the adjustment at the end of the year is also common. But this last year, it was just such an extreme departure, the FSR and production change, if you were to plot it, for it to be so large. It didn't seem like the residual needed a crop reduction that large.
Well, and again, just to reiterate, based on the data we were looking at, obviously we felt it did, you know, and certainly we recognize that it was a larger adjustment than we make in most years. But as usual, we were bringing that quote residual number into alignment with what we've seen historically. You know, again, looking at the data that we had at the time. So that's really about as much as I can say about that.
Okay. Yeah, it looked out of line of the historical trend line, but okay, maybe it was different at the time. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you for the detailed question, Jenny. I'm going to move on to Alan, and I'm going to unmute you, Alan, so you're available to talk if you wish.
All right, thank you. Alan Brigler, Brigler Marketing Management out in Omaha. This is a related question for feed and residual as well. We've got a huge drop in DDG production here because of the ethanol plant shutdowns. We know there's going to be, and already is, a substantial increase in corn feeding because of the lack of DDG availability. How is that going to be handled in the Wasde reports here in the next month or two? Are we going to have to wait until after the June grain stocks report to find out what happened, or are we going to be able to make some changes in either May or June Wasde?
Mike, do you have any thought on that?
Great question, Alan. Obviously, any given month, all numbers are on the table, which would include feed and residual. I will say, however, that given the uncertainty with just overall corn demand right now and probably in the next coming months, obviously the next quarter stocks report will provide a better indication of what happened in terms of feed and residual disappearance, among other things.
In other words, you're going to wait.
I didn't say that, sir. I said in any given month, all numbers are on the table.
Mike, can I weigh in a little bit too? There's probably a little bit of question too about livestock numbers going forward. There's a lot of dynamics going on in the livestock market right now.
I mean,
that have yet to play out.
Okay, I think I'm going to move on to Jerry Goodell. Jerry, you are unmuted, so you're welcome to have at it if you want to talk.
Yes, Lance. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you fine, Jerry.
Good. End up over the years, and we've come to this particular meetings many times, we always talk about the fact that some of this data we've had for years has been solid and pretty good over the time. And one of the ones that I've learned that stocks reports are one of those good classic scenarios. We get a great impact from the elevator business. That's really a complete survey there. And then we're making estimates of farms situations in that. Is it the expansion of farm storage that's caused the dynamics of these corn stock numbers to really kind of fly around and have they're not very easy to understand, particularly right now. Even this next one, after you adjusted the one in December, and how that impacted last year, what it's going to impact where we're at now. We've got, we've done 2/3 or 3/4 of our corn demand in the first two stocks reports. So you got any thoughts on how that stock reports got a little weird on us?
Well, I don't know about the how it's gotten weird part, but I can talk a little bit about the stocks estimates themselves. And the off-farm stocks, as you mentioned, it's effectively a census. But the thing that we have to keep in mind is that even though it's essentially a census, that just means we're attempting to get information from virtually every elevator out there. But much like any other survey or census you do, you don't get 100% response. And so there is, even though it's very, very good data, we get very high completion rates, but we don't get everything. And so there is some room for us to need to make some adjustments in there based on the reports that we don't get in. On the on-farm side, we collect that data from the same producers that we're collecting the acreage yield and production information from. So, back in March, about 80,000 farmers, in addition to asking them how many acres they intend to plant to the various crops this year, we also asked all of them to report to us the quantities of grains and oilseeds that they had stored as of March the 1st. And so we're going to the right people. We're certainly getting it directly from the source, but we're not getting 100% response. And when farmers are reporting stocks, that's not always an exact science either. And so there can be a little bit of wiggle room around that. We certainly have a lot of analysis in place to account for that. But, it's subject to some of the same, error that we see, whether it's acreage yield, production, prices, or any other survey work that we do. And that's why you can see some revisions like we saw back in January in the report there. So it's not just production that we can consider making revisions to when the balance sheet indicates a change is necessary, but stocks certainly are a component that we can look at for revision as well. Procedurally, we haven't changed what we're doing over the years. So, if you're seeing a little bit more noise around what some of that data looks like, it's not because we've changed how we do what we're doing. It would be pure speculation on my part to say what might be causing a little bit more of that, what you're seeing. Although certainly we've seen some different crops the last 2 years as well. So I don't know if that's coming into play or what, but it's not our procedures. We haven't changed them.
So in reality is we're not going to have some kind of test weight issue that may be causing some of this problem in some of these elevators, and not elevators so much as the on-farm situation. Looking at a bin, it's very hard for a person to figure out test weight if he's got 100,000 bushel bin and it's half full. It might be 45,000 instead of 50. So that's the issue, I think, is really a factor that's because we've got an explosion. We all know we've got an explosion of on-farm storage, and that's making it difficult for everybody.
Yeah, and that's certainly a possibility. But, what I can say about that is that, again, nobody's going to know better what's stored in those bins on the farms than the farmers themselves. If, in fact, they're not able to get an accurate measure on what's in there because of test weight issues, then that can play a role in that. But nobody's going to know that information any better. So that's where we continue to go get that. We have talked to some farmers about that issue. And from, specifically the farmers we've talked to indicate that they're certainly trying to incorporate that into their numbers, but we all know until that grain goes across the scale somewhere, it's hard to know exactly what some of that could look like as well.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on. There's a question, where are the slide decks? And Matt, if you're out there, if possible, maybe you could go ahead and push the slide decks out to all the registered attendees. I think you have a full set of those. If not, we'll do it after the meeting. So we'll make sure that happens. Also, the document that you got along with the registration had a lot of what was in the slide deck. So just a note there. Jerry Goodell had another question. This was towards Cindy. Last fall, many ERS main office employees, I guess, were switched to Kansas City. What % of positions have been filled in the new location? How many annual and specific articles have been postponed or canceled because of reduced staff being available?
Yeah, Jerry, yes, we did have roughly 3/4 of our positions were moved out to Kansas City. We did have some attrition, as is well known, and we've been working actively to hire and refill those positions. Your questions are sufficiently broad that I actually don't have an overarching answer to the specifics, but if there's a particular report that you're curious about, I'd have a better shot at answering. I'm not aware of there being issues with delays. We have our releases scheduled on our ERS calendar on our website as to when reports are coming out. Those are still being published. But if you have a particular report in mind, let me know and I'll be happy to look into it for you.
Okay, Dan or Lance, when and where is the stat chat that you had mentioned? Thank you. This is from Matthew Brennan.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that one, Joe, since I hosted it. It's on Twitter. So at 1 o'clock Eastern time after the major crop reports, again, 1 o'clock Eastern time, I will be on Twitter. We call it our Stat Chat series. If you put the hashtag Stat Chat and do a search on that, the goal is that when people send questions in, they'll actually include that hashtag in their question. I always try to include it in my response so that you'll be able to find those easily. But what's unique about Stat Chat is obviously Twitter is 24/7, but during Stat Chat at 1 o'clock, everybody's made aware that I will be on there answering questions directly, so that at the time, you're not just submitting a question to some random, at USDA_NASS, social media manager, but it'll be me that you're talking to, and to ensure that that you're talking to me, I end all of my responses with LH. And so it's just an opportunity for folks to get some real-time answers to questions typically focused on the report that was just released, although pretty much anything is fair game at that point. And even if you don't have a specific question that you want to ask, we have tons of people who get on there at 1 o'clock and follow it, because you can see every other question and answer that's put out there. And so if one person has the question, chances are pretty good hundreds of people have that same question, and so you get a chance to have that answer. I will add, though, that I do follow, try to follow the account as much as I can as well. So if you've got questions outside of that 30, 45-minute window, certainly put them out there. If I don't see it, somebody that's managing the account on a more regular basis for us, if it's for me, they'll point it out to me, and I'll get on there anytime and give you an answer to the question. So it's just another way that we're trying to be as transparent as we can and give you as many opportunities as possible to interact with us.
I'll move on to one other question that we had before the session started. Will there be any crop data collection problems due to the current situation? Any problem with the release of crop reports? I think we've covered that. Any problem with meat or export inspections? So, and then also any problem with global data at embassies? Any problem getting farmer data for FSA? So I don't know if any of our panelists would like to offer an additional comment, as some of this ground we've touched on already. Okay. All right. I want to move on. Dan, can a separate file for quick stats be posted each day that has only the new or updated figures instead of the entire quick stats data set?
That's an interesting question. Right now, we're not set to post just information from the one day. We're set up to basically update the database as it is. Are you hearing me or not hearing me? Or?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah, I'm able to hear you. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. But yeah, that's something, if that's something that is needed or wanted by the community as a whole, we can put that into our new dissemination process when we're working on the new reporting, new dissemination of reports. Excuse me.
I think we can also carry that back. It is quite possible that one can filter the results to simply have an API pull that'll only pull data that's just been posted that particular day. So
yeah, Joe, I was going to say, Joe, that one of the fields that gets populated is the load date. And so it would certainly be possible for you to do a data pull that shows you what's new on any given day.
Yeah, so for the person asking that question, reach out to us and we'll definitely work with you.
Yeah, the one thing that you might want to, we're going to need more information, because obviously when we post information for a particular day, it also might include revisions for a particular quarter or previous report. And so I think we're going to need, you know, is the information that's being requested only for that particular report, or are they looking for revisions from previous quarters to go along with it? So I think we need to know more details before we can say that it's something that we could readily do right away.
Okay, I want to move on to a question by Glenn Tonser from Kansas State University. In the coming months/years, once a return to, quote, normal occurs, what plans are there by NASS and perhaps other agencies to evaluate any bias that occurred with increased reliance on primary data collected electronically? I'll make a couple quick comments. We are doing some simulation or some evaluation work with regard to the June area survey that Lance mentioned in our research division, so we are evaluating that. I suspect we will do some studies. We collect an awful lot of data right now from both mail and telephone, and so I think it really depends on the survey. Dan, do you have anything to add, or Herman or Travis?
No, I don't have anything more, Joe. Thanks.
Okay.
No, Joe.
This is from Bill McCary. The week class data published previous year can be used to allocate production monthly for that year. However, if USDA adjusts the week class data during the forecast year, this makes allocating the state date for the match report totals. If there is a change to winter wheat class, could NASS detail that data to allow analysts an easier task to match state class data to the totals? Lance, I think that's coming to you.
Sure. And so the standard practice for NASS for setting those class numbers by state throughout the forecast season is to just utilize the percentage distribution from the previous season. We don't collect in-depth class level data until September when we're doing the final estimates for the season. So effectively, if you look at those percentages that we publish in the small grain summary the previous year, that's generally what we're going to carry through throughout the forecast season. There are a few occasions where maybe we'll get access to some new information, and obviously we want to try to make those numbers as accurate as possible. So if that happens, there have been some rare occasions where we've made some adjustments, but generally speaking, we're just carrying those percentages forward. And of course, they're whole percentages, so you're going to get some rounding in there if you're trying to get exactly precise. So we limit what we publish in the monthly report to those U.S. totals by class, but that's what they're based on. And of course, you're not going to see, you know, we've got the states that we don't publish individually during the forecast season as well. So that might cloud what you're looking at a little bit too, because for those smaller states, you don't actually know what the state totals for winter wheat as a whole, or the other weeks later on in the season as well. So until everything's revealed, it's just going to be a little bit difficult to get exactly to those state level totals.
There was something in the chat window I want to highlight for folks that you may not have seen it. This was from John Ferreira from the Cornell University Mann Library. The USDA ES-MIS system, which archives and disseminates reports for NASS, ERS, AMS, World Board, and FAS, is still active, but the only change being that the help desk phone is not staffed. Questions can still be answered at the Contact Us link. So something to keep in mind there. Next question, again from Bill McCary. Could NASS reduce the number of other states in its monthly production reports, especially for white wheat states? Lance, I'm not, I guess I'll give you that one. I'm not sure.
And that's a little bit of a follow-on to the comment I just made about the fact that we don't publish every state individually during the forecast season, and I'm assuming that's what Bill is referring to. You know, in a perfect world, we would publish 50 states for every crop and every report that we do, but the reality is we've got to balance, you know, budgets against, you know, the need for the data that's out there. So we have to prioritize some of what we do. And obviously, to publish more of that information at a more granular level, that means we have to collect more information and we have to expend more resources to do that. So, you know, right now, what that means for our program is we focus our efforts on, you know, the states that contribute the largest proportion to the totals. Throughout the forecast season, that shrinks a little bit more, and we focus again, trying to get, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 85 to 90% published individually, but certainly we're still evaluating those remaining states. We're just not gathering, as in some cases, as much data, some cases not any data at all, and evaluating it based on other factors in surrounding states. But really, like I said, it's just a balancing of resources versus priorities.
Okay, I'm going to hop around just a little bit. You know, we're almost coming up on time, so I'm going to kind of pick through and highlight a couple of questions. We won't get through them all here online, but we'll make sure that all these questions do get answered. And there was a question, I'm not sure if I shared the answer or not, but I think there was a question if there would be a recording of this. And there is. We took a recording, and we'll have to figure out exactly how to post or link that for folks that might be interested. But I have a question here for Joe DeCampo over at Census. You had mentioned something new coming out in June concerning trade. Would you mind repeating that information?
Absolutely. We have a revision policy where we will go back, and when people correct their export data, or import data, we will go back and retroactively put it into USA Trade. We do it over a 3-year period. So this coming June, I believe it's June the 4th. I might be wrong about that, but it's the same day that we release our April trade data. We will also be releasing the revisions to 2017, 18, and 19 data.
Okay, thanks.
Hmm?
I'm going to pick through here for one last question, and then we'll kind of wrap up. I want to be respectful of everyone's time today. So let's see. Here's one for Cindy. We'll wrap up with this. Does ERS Food Expenditure Series or any database break down the sales of food at home and the sales food away from home, FAFH, in more detail? For instance, in dairy, percent of cheese, butter, and fluid milk consumed at home versus away from home. Timely question.
Yes, it is, and we do. These URLs are pretty long, so it might be best if I answer this one on paper, but I will say if you need the information today, you can go to our website under data products and look for food consumption and nutrition intakes. And then the other database is also under our data products tab, food availability per capita data system. And again, I'll send those URLs with the answers to questions.
Okay, great. Well, before I conclude today, I have some thanks I want to offer. First, I want to thanks to all the panelists and staff addressing questions today. I appreciate their willingness to be flexible and share updates on their program of work. I think all of Americans have a great interest in their food supply today and the supply chain that gets it in the hands of consumers. Now more than ever is paramount. I want to offer a thank you to all of our attendees. You're important to us, and we value your input, and thank you for taking time to be a part of this exchange. I want to thank our organizers and planners. Matt Gregg, who's been my special assistant for the last 4 years, is moving on to another important job in NASS, and I wish him well. Marissa Ruber, who's going to be my new special assistant. Patricia Snipe also has assisted. Jean Porter for assembling the booklet, and our closed captioning volunteers who had to do a lot of typing. Jennifer Mayworm, Christy Meyer, Tanisha Boomer, Lindsay Dernansky, and Erica Sherrill. And of course, I have a special thanks to all the thousands of farmers, ranchers, and businessmen that pause in their busy day to provide information that we need to do our work. Getting farmers and ranchers to report to us is very important. We need to make our case every day for their time and attention. We need your help. Please make sure and let data providers know how do you use NASS data. We want to make sure and get online responses. While almost all of our surveys have been online for about a year, we're making a big push for online response. It's convenient for our respondents, and we need your help. So please let data providers know how you're using that NASS data, ask them to respond, and ask them to respond online if possible. Thanks for the excellent turnout. All the agencies are going to pay attention to your input and review what can be done to improve products and services. You'll get an evaluation at the end of from the registration email. Please give us your feedback. We welcome your roses, your thorns, and of course your suggestions for improvement. With that, I think we're going to bring it to a close. We will get answers to these questions that are still up, and we will communicate on our website slides and all of that, and this report and such, a copy of this recording of the meeting. So with that, thank you for your time today, and we'll bring it to a close. Appreciate it, everybody.